Unique Storytellers proudly brings you Just Mercy, a soul-stirring tale drawn from real life. This is the journey of Walter McMillian, an African-American man whose life takes a devastating turn in 1987. We first meet Walter in Alabama, where he lives peacefully, until he's suddenly accused of murdering a white girl named Rhonda, who was just 18 years old. The officer who arrests him harbors deep hatred toward black people, and despite Walter's insistence that he can prove his innocence, no one listens. The system turns its back on him, and he's sentenced to death for Rhonda's murder. But before the execution, he's sent to prison to await trial. 2 long years pass. Then comes 1989. We're introduced to Bryan Stevenson, a Harvard Law graduate who has just become a lawyer. After earning his degree, Bryan moves to Alabama with a mission close to his heart. He wants to help those who can't afford legal representation. This is a time when racial tensions run high, and white communities often exploit black individuals in every sphere of life. Bryan himself is a black man, and he knows the struggle firsthand. In Alabama, Bryan meets Eva Ansley, a fellow lawyer with a heart just as pure. Together, they form an organization called the Equal Justice Initiative. Their goal is to fight for those who've been falsely accused and imprisoned, offering legal support completely free of charge. Bryan tries to open an office, but because of his race, no one is willing to rent him space. Undeterred, he begins working from home. Soon, Bryan heads to the state prison to meet with inmates. But before he's allowed inside, he's subjected to a humiliating strip search, all because he's black. Inside, he visits a special unit where inmates are awaiting execution. He quickly realizes that most of the prisoners here are black men. Bryan is searching for those who might be innocent, men who deserve a second chance, and he's determined to fight for them. That's when he meets Walter. During their conversation, Walter expresses deep hopelessness. He tells Bryan that trying to fight the system is pointless. In his eyes, the government never rules in favor of black people. He urges Bryan to walk away, to leave it all behind. Bryan begins reviewing Walter's case file, and what he discovers leaves him completely stunned. The entire conviction rests on the testimony of just 2 individuals. In the justice system, a death sentence is never handed down based solely on the word of 2 people. What's even more troubling is that one of those witnesses is a convicted felon, someone whose testimony is legally considered unreliable. This revelation strengthens Bryan's belief that Walter is innocent. He's convinced the case is worth fighting, and he decides that Walter's case will be his first priority. Bryan starts meeting with Walter's friends and learns something crucial. On the day the murder took place, Walter was actually somewhere else, with his friends. He's a respected businessman in his community, well known and trusted. But there's one detail that turned the white community against him. Walter had been involved in a romantic relationship with a white woman. That alone made him a target of resentment and prejudice, and the white community never accepted him after that. During this investigation, Bryan meets a young man named Darnell. Darnell shares a shocking piece of information. He personally knows the man who testified against Walter. He also knows that Walter was arrested and sentenced to death for the murder of that young woman. But here's the twist. On the day of the murder, the key witness who claimed Walter was guilty was actually with Darnell the entire time. Bryan urges Darnell to testify in court and share the truth. Darnell agrees. And with that, Bryan now has a powerful witness who could change everything. Bryan gathers all the evidence he's uncovered so far and compiles it into a detailed case file. With determination in his heart, he heads straight to Chapman, the attorney who originally prosecuted Walter and secured his conviction. Bryan wants to show him the file, hoping it will prove Walter's complete innocence. But Chapman refuses to even look at it. He insists that Walter is guilty, calling him a murderer, and coldly declares that nothing can save him now. Disheartened, Bryan walks away. Later, while Bryan is working at Eva's home office, something terrifying happens. Eva receives a threatening phone call. The voice on the other end warns her to stop supporting Bryan. If she continues helping him, they say she'll be killed. The caller claims a bomb has been planted beneath her house, and they hold the remote trigger. One push of a button, and her entire home could be blown apart. Eva is shaken. She immediately calls the police, and soon, her house is surrounded by officers searching every corner for explosives. Thankfully, no bomb is found. Despite the fear and pressure coming from all directions, Eva refuses to back down. She stands firm beside Bryan, and together, they finally open their own office. Their fight for justice continues, and now they take on another case, this time for a man named Herbert. He's accused of killing his girlfriend using a bomb. But there's something deeply troubling about Herbert's situation. His mental health is unstable, and this critical detail was never mentioned in his case file. Bryan and Eva uncover this truth, and Bryan appeals to the court, requesting a stay on Herbert's execution. He needs more time to investigate the case thoroughly and ensure that justice is truly served. Meanwhile, a police car pulls up outside Darnell's house. Darnell is the young man who had agreed to testify in Walter's case. But now, the police arrest him and take him away. When Bryan hears about this, he rushes to the station and confronts the officers. He tells them that no matter how hard they try, Darnell won't back down from telling the truth. But things have changed. Darnell is now terrified. The fear has shaken him so deeply that he no longer wants to be involved. He doesn't want any trouble, and so he decides not to testify. This hits Bryan hard. Darnell was his only witness, and now that hope is gone. Still, Bryan refuses to give up. One evening, while driving, he's suddenly pulled over by two police officers. They order him out of the car and begin searching his vehicle from top to bottom, without giving any reason. It's clear they're not looking for anything. They're simply trying to intimidate him. At the same time, Bryan receives devastating news about Herbert's case. The appeal he filed is completely rejected. The court bluntly states that Herbert is guilty of murdering his girlfriend, and therefore, he will be executed. Bryan is heartbroken. He visits Herbert and gently tells him, "I'll be with you during the final moments of your life." Later, Bryan meets the inmate who had testified against Walter. He urges him to speak the truth, but the man refuses. This is the second witness who had helped convict Walter, and he too is a prisoner. Bryan somehow manages to obtain the man's recorded statements. What he finds is shocking. In one recording, the witness claims Walter is innocent. But in another, he says Walter committed the murder. Bryan also discovers that this man was originally on death row himself. But after testifying against Walter, he was removed from that unit. Everything starts to make sense. Bryan realizes that the police pressured this man into changing his story. They were determined to pin the crime on Walter, partly because of his relationship with a white woman, which had made him a target of racial bias and resentment. Bryan returns once again to the witness who had testified against Walter. He calmly tells him, "I know you were once on death row yourself, but after you testified against Walter, you were removed from that unit." Hearing this, the witness begins to open up. He shares the painful truth. He was pressured by the police. He says the officers tortured him, leaving him with no choice but to falsely testify against Walter. But after Bryan's heartfelt conversation, the man finds the courage to speak the truth. He agrees to testify again. This time, honestly, Bryan brings him to court, where the witness tells the judge that he was forced by the police to lie. But the judge doesn't believe him. He sees the change in testimony as suspicious and assumes the man is now lying. As a result, the judge dismisses the case entirely. Bryan is deeply disappointed, but he refuses to give up. Determined to bring the truth to light, Bryan appears on a major television show called 60 Minutes. There, he shares Walter's story with the entire nation. He explains how Walter is innocent, how his case has been ignored, and how the only reason for this injustice is the color of his skin. He's a black American. Bryan makes a public appeal to the state government, urging them to reopen Walter's case in the Supreme Court. His powerful statement sparks a movement. The decision is made to reopen Walter's case, and this brings immense joy, not just to Bryan, but to the entire black community. Bryan's courage and honesty inspire people across Alabama. Citizens and media begin to speak out, demanding change. They call for an end to racial bias in law enforcement and government institutions. The message is clear: justice must be equal for all, regardless of race. Bryan once again approaches Chapman, the same attorney who had prosecuted Walter and secured his death sentence. Bryan pleads with him, saying Walter is innocent and deserves to be cleared of all charges. But Chapman refuses to believe him. He dismisses Bryan's claims and asks him to leave. By now, Walter's case has gained widespread attention in media. Chapman sees the coverage and begins to investigate the case himself. As he digs deeper, he starts to realize that something isn't right. The evidence doesn't add up, and it becomes clear that Walter may have been wrongfully convicted. Chapman returns to Bryan and tells him he's ready to stand by his side. When Walter's case is brought back to court, Chapman is present. In a powerful moment, he withdraws every charge he had previously filed against Walter. The courtroom witnesses a turning point. Walter is officially declared innocent. The man who once faced execution is now free, all because Bryan never gave up. Walter's eyes fill with tears. He can hardly believe that he's finally being released from prison. His family is overwhelmed with joy. As Walter walks out of the prison, he stops to greet the other inmates, men he had shared years of his life with. Now, he steps into the world as a free man, ready to live life like a bird set free. Bryan and his white partner, Eva, make a heartfelt decision. They vow to dedicate their lives to helping people like Walter, those who've been imprisoned without cause, those who have no one to fight for them. On the other side, we see Walter and Bryan continuing their journey, not just as lawyer and client, but as lifelong friends. Though it's proven that Walter did not commit the murder, the case itself is never truly solved. But this isn't just Walter's story. It's a reflection of countless innocent lives around the world. People who spend their entire lives behind bars for crimes they never committed. And so, the journey of Bryan Stevenson and Walter McMillian becomes more than just a courtroom battle. It becomes a symbol of hope, resilience, and the fight for justice. In a world where truth is often buried beneath prejudice, their story reminds us that one voice, one act of courage, can change everything. Walter walks free, but the scars of injustice remain. Bryan continues his mission, not for recognition, but for every soul forgotten behind prison walls. Their bond, forged in pain and perseverance, stands as a testament to the power of compassion and belief in what's right. This isn't just the story of two men, it's a mirror to society, a call to look deeper, to question louder, and to stand taller for those who cannot. Because justice isn't a privilege, it's a right. And when we fight for it together, we make the world a little more merciful. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep these voices alive. Let's keep the mercy moving.